I want to thank you guys for the opportunity to come and kind of show off a little bit today. Number one, I'm just a good old Okie from the country, and I'm blessed to work with some very smart and talented people. So I am very excited that Megan's going to share some of the stuff that she's been working on today. It's making a huge difference. First, a little bit about American Fidelity. We are a privately owned life and supplemental health insurance company based out of Oklahoma City, about 65 years. Primary markets are education employees, auto dealerships, municipalities, healthcare providers. Past 9 years, one of our great distinctions is we've been included in Forbes' greatest places to work, 100 best companies to work for. We're a great place to work, and I can truly say that I've been there since 1996, so I'm kind of an old guy, and I love it there. So kind of like the state of Oklahoma. You couldn't get me hardly out of either one of them. So we do have about 1,800 employees, and we face challenges every day about the marketplace evolving and people's expectations evolving. Is there anybody in here who doesn't have a cell phone or a tablet with them today? No. See, I remember the day when those things were designed as evil. They're not, they're just a toy. They're not going to do anything important. I remember when email was that way. You can't stop the machine that is evolution. So, especially in the technological side. So what is the only ammunition that we have to be able to address these needs? In my opinion, the ammunition we have is data, okay? And we have data out there and all around us. Data that can give us answers, data that can give us new insights. We have data that can provide us with opportunities to do things differently. It's incumbent upon us to capitalize on that, right? It's in front of us. So what I like to say is we need to quit focusing on our limitations and just start focusing on what the possibilities are. And sometimes that's hard to do. You invest a lot of time in learning certain things and then it changes. It's difficult, but we have to force ourselves to adopt that type of philosophical approach to looking at what are the possibilities, what can we learn, what can we do better. The other thing I will say is that driving business value, even with data and technology, is a sheer act of will. It just is not going to happen automatically. You need to be tactical about it. You need to be very driven. You need to have goals established and work towards those. And if you do that, you can actually start to deliver some new business value, some new insights that significantly make a good difference. So some of the use cases you see on the board are some of the use cases that are germane to what we do for a living every day. Product development, marketing and customer acquisition, underwriting, claims processing, account management, and policy renewal. So those are the type of things that are our bread and butter and the things that make a difference for us, so we tend to focus our efforts there. That being said, I actually want to turn it over now to Megan to walk through a few of the use cases and some of the information. And, I again want to say, Megan, you've just been transformational in your ability to approach this stuff. And so thank you, and let's let them know.
Thank you. Well, we couldn't really have done it all without Mark's leadership. He's our fearless leader who fights through all the red tape for us, gets us money and tools we need. So it's been really great to work with him. It's been a great team. Okay, so I'm going to just talk to you. You saw on the previous slide a few of the big use cases you were seeing in insurance. So we're seeing big trends towards implementing fraud analytics, to using data to better understand and market to our customer segments, to use data to predict who's going to churn and be able to predict that early so that we can intervene before they actually would churn. There's lots of different interesting topics like this. And so today we're going to talk about 3 of our specific use cases and how we're implementing them for big wins in American Fidelity. So first of all, we have this case of knowing our policy holders. So this is a classic market segmentation problem. Previously, when I came to American Fidelity, I asked who our customer is, and people said, well, our average customer is a female in her 40s. But when you think about that, It means if we market to that person, if we cater our products and services to that person, we're actually only catering to a very small segment of our actual market. And so we thought, wouldn't it be better to not think of our average customer and build our business around our average customer, but to think about what are the different groups of customers, what percent is each group of our business, and really think about differentiated marketing strategies for each one. Because what a millennial might be interested in is very different than what someone who is a baby boomer with a family would be interested in. And so that's where that kind of came from. So the approach, we built a model in R after getting a lot of different data. The data came from many different areas. A lot of people think about demographics as part of it, and that's a big driver of it. But one thing we found that was really important was those demographics only matter if the demographics result in actual meaningful differences in customer behavior. So if you look at, say, age in your customer demographics, and you don't really see that based on age, people buy differently or behave differently, that might not be a good variable to include, even though it does differentiate the customers, but why would we care if a 25-year-old and a 50-year-old still behave generally the same? So we looked at the demographics, we looked at the behavior habits, we look at how they engage with our content. Are they accessing our products and services over the phone? Are they using more online tools? Things like that. We looked at how long they've been a customer with us, many things to eventually get our demographic or get our segments together. And so we ended up after this with about 11 segments, and we were able to combine this information with another analysis, which was called our next suggested product one. I won't get into that analysis, but basically that one is a predictive model that will identify what product you're most likely to buy given what other set of products you're already buying. And so we were able to take that information and combine it. Now we know if you've already bought disability, next maybe you're most likely to buy accident if you're in the urban millennial group, right? If you bought disability and you're in the boomer generation, maybe the next suggested product is a different one. So we were able to marry that together, and then from that, we were able to then make the marketing more targeted and personalized. So now we will actually send policyholders more targeted emails before their enrollment so that they can read about the products that are most likely to be useful for them. Okay, so this is another business case. This is one of my favorites, one that I've been working a lot on. So previously, what we had, the referral process was a very manual process. So people, unfortunately, within insurance commit fraud. This problem focuses specifically on disability fraud because that's our biggest product. And so we were really curious, how can we improve our detection rates of fraud within the disability space? And how can we make that more automated? And how can we see patterns that maybe a human alone might not have seen before? So previously, our disability cases would be referred to us by people. That could be external people giving us a call in our tip line, or it could be internal, that a claims adjuster saw something that was a little bit odd, or a customer service rep received a phone call that seemed a little odd. But a problem in doing this is when you're relying on humans, a human might not see the total behavior. A human might not notice that, well, that call seemed normal enough, but gosh, I didn't really know that that person has made 40 claims over the past year. That's kind of odd behavior. So the computer can take into account several different factors related to their claims history and the claim itself and different behavioral patterns. And it can really identify some of those patterns that are associated with fraud. Let's see what else. Also, another thing is that no, sorry, don't have anything else to say about that one. So anyways, so we brought together several different, go to the next slide. Okay, so this was our approach here. So one, I think that data science is a team sport. I think that's very, very important. So we actually, even though I'm the data scientist at American Fidelity, I didn't start with the data. I actually started with talking to all the business units. We worked together with people in claims and benefits and our actuaries and our fraud investigators and really just talked to them a lot about the problem. What what was it about this case that made you want to refer it? What was it that helped you solve that case? Just trying to understand those different attributes of those fraud cases that we could then build into to parameters within the model. So then next, we gather the data we needed based on all our conversations, and we built several different features. We engineered many more features into the model, and then we brought in the historical data from the investigations unit, and so we're able to build several predictive models. We actually found Data Robot was really, really useful here. So that's been a great tool for us. We know how to program in R, we in Python, and we can do that. But what we loved about Data Robot was that it saved us a lot of time. So instead of building each model individually in different tools and kind of toggling between the tools and scrolling up and down and looking at your summary stats, we can put it all into Data Robot and identify a few models that are going to perform well. And then we can take that information and use that to kind of, play around in a tool like R or Python directly and hone that model and improve it. But we found just Data Robot was able to do in a few hours what would have otherwise taken weeks in terms of testing out like 100 different models. So it's been a really great boom to us, and also it's been great from the perspective of it's really opened up data and analytics to many people within the organization who might not possess some of the same capabilities for programming. So we explored this tool with Data Robot, and then we productionized that model. Data Robot allows you to export scored data just in a CSV form or an Excel sheet, but it also allows you to actually deploy that model via API too. So there's lots of different options, and Data Robot also really helped us a lot with making that deployment stage much smaller or shorter. Because sometimes you build a model and then it just takes a lot of programming to get that into production. But Data Robot helped smooth that out for us. So we ended up our top scored cases. We were able to refer to SIU, which is our Special Investigations Team. This is a really important part to note that our fraud model is not really a fraud model. It's a red flags model. It actually just identifies what cases look suspicious based on their patterns and what we've seen historically, but then it just refers them to our Special Investigations Team to actually be reviewed by a human. So it's not actually identifying this case as fraud. It just is identifying that this case has a pattern that might make it suspicious, that kind of ticks a few of our red flags, and that we need a human to look at that. And so, and then that human is going to go through the same process, which includes many, many steps of reviewing their account history, getting information from their doctor on whether or not the disability is still occurring, is still limiting their work. It might involve even surveillance by a person. So it's still a very rigorous process that is very human intensive. But what we were able to do with this model is automate a lot of that, automate a lot of the referral process, and also identify cases that might not have otherwise gotten referred. And that's resulted in a lot of the quality of our cases has really increased. Before, our rates, when we would refer over, say, 100 cases, the percent that would actually be fraud was much lower than what it is now with the model. So we're able to refer more high-quality cases, which saves us a lot of time and money, because they're not investigating 100 cases to get a few wins. They're able to look at 100 cases and get a much higher percentage of wins from that. So, and then we're also able to, in doing so, detect some fraud that might have otherwise gone unnoticed because, again, like there was no maybe glaring thing. You weren't after talking to the customer, you didn't get that gut feeling that this is fraud, right? But with the model, since it looks at so many different factors across so many systems in a way that a human really couldn't process in their mind alone, it's able to identify and pick up on some nuances that have really helped us increase our detection rate. Okay, I'll let you talk about chatbot.
Okay. Before we start talking about the chatbot, I wanted to talk about some just broader things that I've learned on this journey. I was very fortunate to become a chief data officer when it was not even yet in vogue. I would go to conferences and people would say, "What's your title?" I'd say Chief Data Officer, and they'd say, "What's that?" you know. At the same time, I was working with a group out of MIT, and we established the International Society of Chief Data Officers, and we were talking about, you know, what is a chief data officer and what do they do, you know? And the truth of the matter is a chief data officer needs to deliver value. My president and our chief operating officer, the way he engaged me is he said, I want you to weaponize our data, to totally just take out our competition, to capture as much market value as we can, weaponize it. To me, that says we need to deliver value. I find myself many times, I look at things and say, man, that is so cool. That is really awesome. We could do that. That is, you know, because I'm kind of that kind of guy that likes to play with stuff. You know, I bought my first computer in 1988, took it home on a Saturday morning, and I had it in pieces on the table by Saturday afternoon. Managed to get it back together with some pieces left over, and it still worked. So I kind of like the tech stuff. I like new and different things. I like being on the edge. But it always cycles back to we have to deliver business value. So before we continue on too, I just wanted to share a couple more thoughts. What is the most important thing about being able to use data to drive that business value? Anybody have any ideas what that might be? Don't be shy. There's communication. You know, I wasn't going to say that, but that's a huge one. I speak at several universities, and I always get asked the question when I speak at a university, what's the one thing that I need to be able to leave the university with that will make a difference? And I say you need to be able to communicate. You need to be able to communicate ideas, you need to be able to communicate results, and you need to be able to communicate business value. Excellent. Anybody else have anything? Accuracy. Accuracy, you know, we have tons of data. Is it all good? No. You know, that data, not all of it's good data. Is there data that's outside of our ecosystem that's probably better than maybe some of the stuff we have? Absolutely. All right. So yeah, accuracy is key. So you have to be diligent about taking care of your data storage. You have to be diligent about identifying what that data needs to look like and curating it at a certain level. Okay? Anything else? Yes, sir.
Receptive culture.
Receptive culture, man. How much time do we have? Receptive culture is key. I had the distinct pleasure of being able to capitalize on a receptive culture. For those of you who don't know my history, I used to be known as the Grim Reaper. I was the director of audit and special investigations. So I was just in town to stab the wounded, you know, go clean up the battlefield. When I was offered the opportunity to become the chief data officer, I had to become an evangelist, right? And so I went from not caring really a whole lot about culture to being smack dab driving, sitting right in the middle driving culture. And it's imperative, you know, do all you can to educate your C-suite and your E-suite. Do all you can to let them know what you're working on. And again, it cycles back mainly to communication, you know. The more you're in front of them, the more information you can get in front of their eyes, the better off you're going to be. And that's going to help drive the culture. The other thing that we wanted to do is I hit the ground running with a concept called citizen data science. This was back before it was an in vogue term. It was just, mainly it was selfish on my part. I didn't have any resources, so I needed a way to get things, you know, to a certain level. So what we started doing was actually educating folks, trying to drive some grassroots initiatives, trying to get people on board that were inside the business, that maybe their day job wasn't necessarily data and analytics, but they wanted to do new and different things. They had ideas. They had ways that they thought that they could improve the business. And giving them that platform really helped energize that whole process. And it's part of a slide we've got coming up. So, but since we went there, I just went there. One more thing.
What about scale?
Scale. Does anybody here have enough time to actually do all the analysis that you want to on all the data at your disposal?
Never.
Never? That's why scale is important. We have to find ways to scale. We have to find ways to do more with less. And I don't know about you guys, but our most precious resource is time. You know, we got a lot of data, and it's a very precious resource, but it's not our most precious, you know? Most of it cycles back to time. Sometimes on some of these business problems, we have a very short window of opportunity, and you have to be able to capitalize on that. The way you can do that, again, the whole citizen data science philosophy is built on scale. The whole issue of actually going out and finding tools that can help you, that can be a vehicle to help you get to solutions you need, such as Data Robot and many other tools out there, are all about scale. It's not about replacing anything. It's not about, not having bodies there. It's about sheer output. So scale is very important too, and I wanted to touch on that briefly while we were talking in here. And thank you very much. Those were all great insights and are all extremely important in the pursuit of this thing we call weaponization of data. Chatbots. Anybody like dealing with chatbots? I'm weird. I personally do. Yeah, because they're getting better. I mean, if I have to go get a prescription at Walgreens, I really don't want to deal with a human. I mean, that's just me. If I have to renew my property and casualty insurance, I really don't want to deal with a human. I just want to get online. I want to do my thing. I want things automated. And my wife asked me one night, she said, this stuff, artificial intelligence, it's getting really good and you're able to do so much with it. Yeah, and I was like, yeah, and I really like it. She says, what does that say about your intelligence? I said, that's probably a valid point. But yeah, I need all the help I can get. So I want to capitalize on this thing called artificial intelligence. Generally, when I talk with a business or with a vendor or with even a party that I do business with, I get very frustrated very quick if I can't get the answers I want, when I want them, right, in a succinct manner. I mean, getting passed around from one phone rep to another phone rep, I'll hang up. Getting put on mold is just a killer. I called one of a company that I do business with, just to ask them a simple question one day, and they put me on mold. And I actually sat there with it on my speaker, and I was on mold for 23 minutes before somebody got back on the line. And by then, I said, forget it. So what do chatbots bring to the table? They bring to the table the ability for us to instantaneously meet needs, right? And the cool thing about chatbots is when I say chatbots, do most people think voice? Do you think on the phone? Or do you think texting or like Facebook? Yeah. When I speak about chatbots, I actually don't like the word chat. I want to find a different word to use. Because what I think about is omnichannel communications. Customers call us with a question. They can email us with a question. We even have some customers that text us through some of the SMS lines we have that will text us questions. We actually have customers today that will actually sit and send us mail. Still. Believe that? I do. Majority of our calls and emails are on the same topics. In other words, we do have economy of scale based upon the questions they're asking. Unfortunately, sometimes wait times can be long. It depends on how many customers you have calling, how many pieces of information are trying to fit through that particular channel, and how many resources you have available, as well as how long it takes you to answer their question. And then having humans answer the question can get what? Expensive, right? So the solution to that is to have an ecosystem that actually knows what the most common questions that we have are. Number two, it has a knowledge base of information that is ready to solve that particular question. It can actually meet that need. The other thing is that knowledge base provides what? Are the answers going to be different from channel to channel, or is it going to be the same? Same. We actually want those answers to all be very consistent. The consistency is important to us. We don't want somebody getting a different answer if they go via one channel as opposed to another one. We want everybody to get the same answer. So that consistency is key. So using that approach, we can actually improve the outcomes. The thing that we get from the chatbot too is we're doing things at the speed of light. We're doing things as fast as our GPUs, CPUs, and the I/O can keep up. Generally, that's a lot faster than human. So what that brings us is speed and, again, economy of scale. It's going to, I'm not going to say it's going to. Actually, I will. A chatbot will increase profitability. There is a little caveat in there. If you're opening up new channels of communication that you haven't opened up before, guess what? You're going to have new inflows of questions and communication. So you're going to have to be prepared to meet that. So, but ultimately, I do believe chatbots actually can make us more profitable. The key there is the chatbot has to be what? Accurate, timely, fast, consistent, right? But we have a desire to have exceptional customer service, and we actually pride ourselves on that. But I want to do anything and everything we can to enhance that equation to make it more better. So the things that we can talk about are we can actually simplify purchase processes. Any of you have any complex purchase processes? Some folks have very simple ones. Other folks like us have very complex ones. The chatbot can help automate that and can make that a simpler process. User experience improvement. Now, one of the vendors we're working with on voice synthesis has a guy in their office, and he synthesized his own voice and then actually had a phone call with his mom. Okay? And he was sitting behind a keyboard typing some responses. He had some pre-done that he could just throw in there for speed, but typing the others, and it was actually the synthesized voice that was actually responding to her. How do you think that went over? She had no clue. She was like, okay, honey, bye. User experience improvement. I think she actually thought, that he was actually better than he usually was, because everything was pretty crisp, So customer care improvement, again, consistency. Are they getting the same answers to the same questions, do you have two customers that are actually maybe work at the same employer that have a service, and are they both getting the same answer? That can be very damaging. Personalized service integration opportunities, while the chatbot's on there and they're asking certain questions, it gives you opportunities to actually inject some marketing materials in relation to the models that Megan was talking about. It gives you further opportunities to capitalize on them. And again, resource savings. So right now, we are, what I would say, very early. We are going to continually test what we've built out because we're going to be very judicious in what we release to the public. I'm a big believer that we're not going to release something that's half-baked out there because the stakes are big, right? But the amount of time that we've been able to save over the past year and the new tools that are evolving on the marketplace are making this something that everybody can get their hands on. So if you haven't started playing with NLP yet, if you haven't started playing with some of the AI back behind it, I highly recommend you do so. The tools that are out there are just incredible. So those are some of the projects we've been working on. And I know some of that was some generic descriptions, and that's unfortunately where we're kind of at today with what we can share. But I would like to talk a little bit about implementation. I think Megan also has some great things that she's learned along the way on our journey. And so let's go up and share some of that.
Okay, so one thing, I think you could probably see that these are all really high business value cases. And so a big part of that was we worked as a team. Data science is definitely a team sport. So sometimes you might find a tool that's really cool and you can figure out an application for it because you really want to use the tool. Maybe that'll work, but we really were starting with the business problems and trying to understand what would be the most value if we could solve, and then trying to figure out from there the tools and approaches that would best solve those problems. Another thing, when you work with the teams, the different business units for the beginning, you're also gaining a lot of buy-in. People don't tend to burn down the barn they built, right? So you're working with them from the beginning, you're engaging them from the beginning, and you're working on problems that they really care about. So this means you develop solutions that are more useful and also more valuable to the business. Again, too, on that value proposition, we really focused and prioritized. There's so many projects that we could do, but there's only some that actually add business value, and then within that, there's prioritization of those projects. So we really focused on things that we had the tools we could do, we had the business need, we had, relative to another problem that we could spend our time on, it was going to bring more value in. Another thing, I think this is important, you probably could speak more on this too, but getting those initial wins. So if you start tinkering around with stuff and you're not showing value, they might not want to keep your department or position very long. So we really had to think a lot about what projects are going to get those high business value. We have to also constantly sell ourselves. Mark and I are always having to go around with presentations showing how much money was saved by this project, or how much more revenue was gained by another project. So always thinking about that business value as part of the process. I know sometimes as a data scientist, it's not quite as fun, but it's pretty necessary that you can actually, when you're scoping out a project, that part of it is identifying how much, more revenue might it bring in, how much cost savings might it bring, and then pitching that idea to your company. Also, when we start with projects another thing was, sometimes with data, it can be scary for the business units. If you're trying to go in and saying, hey, we got a great idea, we can automate this process that you're doing, and we can, reduce colleague time. Well, people kind of think, well, wait, that means you're gonna cut my department in half, right? So that can be a really scary proposition. And you want to work on, we found success in working with things that people are excited about, that people are coming to us and wanting to do, as opposed to starting with things that might feel threatening to people as well. So once you gain this trust and you start showing value, you can gain that trust and you can start tackling other issues as well. Is there anything you wanted to add on that one?
I want to kind of tag along. When we're talking about showing value, and this is something that Megan will shake her head in agreement with as soon as I say it, but I harp all the time on metrics. You need to find out what's important to your organization. Is revenue growth important? If it is, you need a metric. And for about anything that you're working on, you need to try and tie back to that metric and show that, hey, we're contributing to the overall. If it's expense reduction, hey, there's some metrics you can tie in there, right? If it's customer engagement, you can always tie in the metrics on that piece as well. Because when we start to talk about things like executive buy-in, if you go into their office and say, yeah, we had an SEO project and we increased the net promoter score by X, is your executive suite going to know what that means? No. We need to come up with a metric that's meaningful to them. We need to learn to talk in their language. I'm even guilty of it all the time. I'm working on a presentation right now that we're going to be giving to a group of our CEOs collectively, and I'm constantly being challenged. We need to make this simpler. No technical speak. We don't want to come off sounding like consultants. You don't want to sound like somebody who's just deeply embroiled in the tech side. You got to get down to what that value is and what they're seeking after, because when you step back, they're under a lot of pressure, and they're generally under a lot of pressure to deliver 3 or 4 key metrics, whether it be increased market penetration, whether it be increased revenue, reduced expense, whatever it may be, that is what is important to them. So if you can actually cycle everything back and bring metrics to the table that help support, hey, with this project, we're actually helping you achieve your goals. Man, that's an easy win. It's very easy to get that executive buy-in when you start talking in their language. So, and a lot of times that is the art, that is the communication that we have to learn to span. And the opportunities, I said earlier, the opportunities are huge out there, As long as we start focusing on the possibilities, communicating those effectively, we can make a huge amount of difference for organizations that really nobody else can. So.
Thank you, Mark. And then another thing on the citizen data scientist culture that Mark mentioned, so this was one that was totally different from me. I came from an organization prior to American Fidelity that was much more, analytical centric. A lot of people would call this a center of excellence model. So the data team would do most of the analysis, deliver the results, things like that. Anytime there was a data question, people came to me. Well, that meant there were bottlenecks. There was me also doing a lot of work that, I'm making a bar chart or I'm doing a predictive analysis. it could really be something very basic or something more advanced. And I spent a lot of time doing both types of things. What, this for, I think, a lot of data scientists is kind of hard to get behind this new approach because you've been trained in all these tools, you've been trained in statistics, and now you're kind of being told, well, we can just give people tools and give them a little training. And I know you did like a PhD, but we could totally, there's a few hours training session, they can get going on it. Well, it can be a little scary at first, right? Because you're thinking, well, they might mess it up. They might not do a good job. But really, it worked. It was amazing. So, and it actually made my job so much more interesting and exciting too. We at American Fidelity, we're really lucky because we have a lot of people who, because, we have a lot of actuaries and things, we have a lot of people who had a lot of the math skills and technical knowledge to have a skill set to build on. But yeah, instead of just having us do all the work and creating those problems that I experienced before, we instead were able to just give them a lot of training and tools. A lot of my job is building training and tools for people. Kayla has been to some trainings I've done, and she's now doing the trainings herself. So she's a really amazing example of somebody who's been growing within the organization and their data skill sets, and we're really proud of her. But yeah, so you can build people to do these tools, and then what happens is that people who are before, when we really realistic about it, people aren't not doing data science. They're just doing it with poor tools and not as effectively, right? They're in Excel and they're copying and pasting stuff, and they're making visualizations using Paint, and it's just very inefficient. So instead, we give them the tools and the capabilities, and now they're able to make their own bar charts. They're able to get to their own data, and they're able to do a lot of things. And now they come to us with maybe a little problem that when they're like, well, I've gotten this far, but I want to get to this far. And we also I don't make a bunch of bar charts and pie charts and all the descriptive stuff. The business is doing that, and I get to focus more on the really fun, predictive problems. And so I really love it, and I encourage you all to think about that model too, because it's built our capacity so much, and it's also allowed us to free up our time for kind of higher level problems that have been probably more impactful to the business.
All right. As far as the presentation, I think we've kind of covered a lot of that, and I've given you all of the stuff that kind of I've learned along the way. I will tell you too that it's not all been easy. I've had to take a lot of chances. I've had to step out a lot and say that things can happen. I've had to step in front of the business and say, you need to be forced to evolve before you're made extinct. It's having some hard conversations, but I promise you in the end, it will move your business forward. So that being the case, I want to thank you for your time. I also want to thank Starspace. These guys are awesome. We're getting actually ready to have some people join them, so I'm ultra excited about being down here, and just thank you. This group, I think, is also part of that whole citizen data science component. Get more people involved, not just have meetings, but do little meetups and have groups where you can share knowledge and information. It's going to make us all better. So, and the more that we can actually keep vaulting Oklahoma City as a little tech of its own, I'm behind that all the way. So let's get her going. So thank you. Yes, sir.
So this is for either of you. When you're working with business intelligence, a lot of times at an operations level, those deeper analytics may not be understood or the impact, like you were talking about in lingo. Internally, when you're trying to sell or introduce something, especially from a research perspective, how do you handle that conversation with the other business units who may not be as technical as you are?
Sure.
You want to hit that? I think we can both hit it. But.
Yeah, I would say, repeat the question. Okay, so if I'm understanding this right, I believe he asked about how do we communicate value of our problems and solutions to people who might not be as technical as us. So one thing I would say is even a technical problem should have a non-technical result, right? And so we really, for me at least, I'm catering it to the audience. If I'm talking to someone in IT, I talk about the technical aspects. But if I'm talking to someone on the executive team, I'm saying things like, we can serve our customers faster. Because we serve them faster, they are happier. Because we serve them faster and happier, they're going to be retained more. We don't have to spend as much money on servicing them, things like that. So I try to think about, what's really important to the audience that I'm focused on, and what are they going to understand. And a lot of times, I don't think I always need to get into, well, we use this tool and we did, this approach. It's just really all about these are the results that we can deliver with it. What do you think?
Yeah, and that gets back more to the metrics piece. I try to abstract all that stuff as far away from the business as I can and really drill it down to what is the value for them and how do we make that better. And the things that some terms that come to my mind in that is speed. You know, they don't care what the speed is measured in. They don't care how it comes. They just want to know they get more of it. Agility, you know, better data, better answers, new opportunities. So if you find a way to abstract all the technical stuff down to those simple business driving concepts, it really helps bridge that gap. You'll run into a few people even on the practitioner side that will be a little technical, and you can deep dive with those. You know, you can say, hey, let's talk about that later. Just try and keep it at the, you know, where really is the value for the business, and it kind of solves a lot of that.
What kind of pushback did you receive by trying to make a culture shift and more data-centric focus, especially when you're talking about handling fraud cases and stuff? You know, we weren't really saying this in fraud case, we were just saying it's possible. What kind of pushback did you receive from that from employees?
Okay. So the question was, what type of pushback do we receive from colleagues as we work on cultural shifts, and how do we effectively address that?
You want me to hit that one? Sure. Yeah, we get hit with, well, we've never done it that way. That's not the way we do things. What other pushback do we get? We don't have time to mess with that. We're too busy otherwise. And what we try to do is address those problems very tactically. You know, number one, that may not be the way you've ever done it, but if we can show you a better way, does it really matter how you do it? If the end result, if the outcome is what you're really focused on, you know, how you get there should be, you know, in anybody's mind up for grabs at any time. I try and come to the table and say, you know, continuous improvement is, I try to be a life philosophy for me, not just in business, but just personally. I try and force myself to become better every day, and we ought to be doing that with any process that we're working on as well, and focusing on the outcome, not you know, let's focus on our destination, not how we're getting there as much. Number two, some of the other things that you will run into, we don't have time to do that, you know. Well, you know, that is a logistics problem, and that kind of is where the citizen data scientist model comes in helpful, because we can actually bring a good idea to the table and actually go recruit resources to come help with the problem, and it lessens the time burden. So we just try to be very tactical in how we solve those. You know, there's always going to be some pushback in that, because change, let's face it, change is difficult. Change is hard. You know, I even am an advocate. I'm an evangelist for change, and you know, and I don't like change sometimes. So it's one of those things we have to continuously challenge ourselves on. You have to continuously challenge the business. You know, if you don't make it better, somebody else will, and kind of drive it, you know, with that type of approach and that messaging. And I think it's really helpful too, again, and I keep going back to this, it's hard for them to argue with the business metrics. You know, if you can get a proof of concept out there and you can show that it improves that metric, it takes away a lot of the arguments, because they just can't argue with it.
And then also to a point I made in the last slide, that early and often engagement is really useful, because for our referral model for the fraud cases, our special investigations team was really, I mean, they were the one coming to us with that. They wanted to have that model built. They were really excited about it. We engaged them early and often, and so we didn't get pushback from that. In fact, they loved that model. They found it really useful to their team. They were so excited that they were able to have so much better productivity, so much higher quality referrals, so they loved it. So I think that's another thing too, engaging them early and having the business be partners with you is important.
Yeah, and to that note too, Megan touched on it earlier, if you meet a hard wall of resistance that's just a tidal wave, approach them and say, well, how can I help you? What would be helpful? What could we do to get the ball rolling? Because everybody has something that needs to be done, right? Everybody has something they need some help with, that they're struggling with. And so sometimes it even works to cycle that conversation back to that type of a value proposition. We had a couple more. Yes?
Yeah, great insight on data science self-service model. The question I have is, how do you bring those citizens to collaborate together to do knowledge sharing?
Can you repeat the question?
So the question was, for the citizen data science model, how do we bring these people together for collaboration? So what we did is we created a team called the Data Navigators. This team is really, really critical to our business. It first started with a smaller team. it was 8 people originally, and these people were tasked with figuring out what tools they wanted, things like that. And that's been critical too, because I have talked to some other companies who, you know, IT will say, oh yeah, we bought everybody Tableau. No one's really using it though. We bought Power BI, you know, no one's really using it though. And, you know, what American Fidelity did, Mark's vision, so it was a great, you know, it's just a great testament to his vision and his ability to think through things. You know, he didn't just say, okay, we hear Tableau is really good, we're going to buy Tableau. He got a team together, and that team was responsible for listening to all the demos, to trialing them, and to ultimately choosing those tools. And so really engaging people and empowering them early on was very, very important. Then after we picked the tools and kind of had set up the main, you know, what's business intelligence look like for our company? What tools are we going to use? What are our priorities? Things like that. We engaged through crowdsourcing. We asked people who's really good at data, and we got from that about 40 people together, and that formed then the data navigators team that I mentioned. And so the first thing those data navigators did is we brainstormed. We had a day where we brainstormed on many, many different topics on dashboards and analytical tools and products that we can develop. And then we actually split everybody up into 8 teams and said, great, so all those ideas you brainstorm on, you know, you guys do them now. Like, you know, you have, you know, 3 or 4 months. We paired them with a mentor, somebody from the original team, and they actually delivered all those products, which was amazing because when we rolled out our BI tool, which was Click, we didn't roll out it with nothing or 1 app or 2 apps. We actually were able to roll it out with 30-something applications in there that were very useful to the business. And so I think really building those teams, bringing them together, giving them a lot of opportunity to be a part of the decision process, and giving them goals, business problems to actually solve and challenge them to do that. We found people really rose to those occasions and were really excited to be engaged meaningfully.
Yeah, what I would add there is, you know, they didn't buy what I would have bought. And that's okay, because they were right. You know, because I didn't know what I was doing. They did. The other thing that I would throw out there that was very important is we approached the key members, the first few members. I had approached each one of them. I had actually done some roadshows about the power of data to the business. And I had somebody in each of those meetings, and they were actually up with me in front of the room taking notes. And they weren't taking notes about they were taking notes on who was engaged. If people were looking at their phones and staring out the window, she was crossing them off the list. If people were nodding their head and they were involved and they were actively engaged, she was circling them. And those were the people that I initially approached to become the first data navigators. And I said, great, man, I've got the thing for you. I've got you more work. I've got you probably some headaches. I've got you a lot of challenges, and I can't pay you nothing. And you got to continue to do your day job. Are you interested? And to a T, every single one of them said what? I'm in. You know? And what I would tell you is I don't have any data in hand today, but those are the people that have actually risen to the top of their departments. And why is that? I mean, it just kind of makes sense. If you're actually delivering valuable solutions and delivering new and valuable content, you're going to stand out. So there is a value proposition in there for them. You know, it was worth their time. Now I give them a lot of headaches still because I go in there and I test them with stuff and I walk out and I say, bye, good luck. But that's part of the empowerment too, is I want them to know that they're in charge of this thing. They can drive it, they steer the ship, and they can make it be whatever they need it to be. And that's, in my opinion, what's helped driving that whole cultural shift to where it's not just some person saying, you're going to do this, you're going to do it my way.
And speaking to that cultural shift, one thing I found amazing from the time I started at American Fidelity to now, we have management meetings, and when I've been invited to them, and Mark goes to all of them, of course, I mean, I'm just amazed to see how now pretty much every presentation is data-driven. Every presentation almost has a Click dashboard that they're, you know, drilling into right there on the fly, and that wasn't the case a few years ago. So I think that's a big testament too, and that's also a reason for why many of those original data navigators had to be able to grow so much in their roles, because now, you know, data is just so critical. It's you know, I hear questions all the time when someone says, well, you know, X, Y, or Z, and someone says, oh, well, how do we know that? Do we have data on that? And that wasn't always the case before. And so I think that's really amazing that, you know, our executives, they want to see the data, they want to see the dashboards, and they're really craving that. And so people who are able to deliver that are doing well in the organization.
Do we have any other questions? Charmaine, I'll get to you.
What are some of the other tools you use? You mentioned like Tableau and Data Robot. What are the ones, what are some of the other ones that we're looking at?
The question was, what are some of the other tools that we utilize? And Megan's probably way better than me to answer that question.
Sure. So I'll just discuss the data science side of it. Mark, you can discuss some of the other ones involving chatbot and things. But for my team, we use our process is basically we're working in SQL to get the data out. And then once we have that, well, not out per se, but connected to a statistical tool. So that could be SAS, Stata, R, and Python. So then we work within those tools. I'm really fine with my team, whatever they are most comfortable in. I mean, everybody has different training. I honestly don't really care what tool or package you use if you're solving the problem and you do it in a replicable way that I can follow. You know, make good code, make good notes in your code, and I'm good. And then from there, we're going to send it out. We're going to connect it up to Click. That's our primary visualization tool. And then we're going to be actually doing the visualization and storytelling, which is so important in Click. That's a typical process for us. And then also, if we do use Data Robot, that's usually coming after the statistical stage because it's not a good tool for cleaning or data prep. So we're doing our data prep in something like R or SAS. Python, and then putting it out into something like Data Robot if we want to use that, or we're doing the statistical analysis directly in one of those statistical tools. Mark, did you want to talk about chatbot and
some of the other tools
cloud?
we're using, even connected with some of the analytics side, are UiPath for RPA, and connecting Data Robot to UiPath via Python to actually give UiPath a brain, or a little one. Because RPA is great, but RPA will just walk straight off the cliff if you tell it to. So we want to, you know, make it a little bit more cognitive. On the chatbot side, some of the things we started with were Lewis in Azure. We branched out from there, and now we're using components from both AWS, Google, well, not both, from all three, Azure, AWS, and Google. And we're playing around with some technology called Lyrebird AI for voice synthesis. Knowledge bases, we're playing around with several different ones, including ones that we've rolled our own. So it's just, you know, we're finding on the knowledge base side that that's pretty, it's literally a database, so we can handle that piece. TensorFlow, you know, some of the big ones. Trying to think, that's really kind of what I'm coming up with right on the top of my head right now. So, Charmaine?
Actually, he asked the question I was going to ask.
Okay. Wonderful. Yes, ma'am.
You talked about it a little bit already, but so you focus more on finding internal talent related to data science and training them up compared to pulling in people externally due to the lack of talent in some cases experience with that?
The question was, or the comment was that it seems that we focus more on developing out internal talent as opposed to bringing in external talent. Is that fair? Yeah. Yeah, and the answer to that was simple. You know, I was given a charge and given no budget. Go do this, and I'm like, okay. And the answer to that is we do have very talented people. Now, I will tell you, I went outside to find Megan. You know, and I was lucky enough to be able to get Megan to come in from the outside and join me on this quest. And, you know, she probably didn't know what she was biting off at that point, but I think she's having fun.
It's been great.
But so we've done a little bit of both. I will tell you this too. I travel, you know, pretty much all over the country and actually even the world. And some of the questions invariably at any meeting, well, you're in Oklahoma City, how do you find talent? And I said, well, number one, that's pretty offensive. Right? And I say number two, you obviously haven't met many folks from Oklahoma City because we have an extensive amount of talent present in Oklahoma City. People told me I'd never find a data scientist. Well, they're still looking, and I got one. People told me I'd never find a full-stack, cross-discipline innovation developer. and they're still looking, and I got one. You know, my point is the talent that you are looking for is out there. It is out there not only in your company, but it's out there in our community. I'm a very big believer that, you know, Oklahoma has been a leader for a long time in innovation. Sylvan Goldman invented the shopping cart and the parking meter, and both of those are just things that civilization would not be where it is today if we didn't have them, you know? So Oklahoma is just chock full of a long list of innovators, and we could spend hours talking about that, and these people are present today in your companies, they're present in your community, they're present in this group. So, you know, a lot of my reasoning for doing the internal search was out of necessity. By the same token, it's generated a lot more than just talent that delivers work product. It's generated that philosophical shift, you know. It doesn't bother me when the executives go to one of the data navigators and they're my answer man, and you know, that's what I wanted to engender. You know, I'm not trying to build a little kingdom where everybody comes to me and I pass out a little bit of, you know, here's your oats for the week. You know, what I want to do is empower an ecosystem. And so I think it's a combination of both, and I hope I totally answered your question. So.
If you're dealing with outside vendors and you need information from them, but they have their data in these little silos, and it's not like a buffet, you know, where you do a data dump and, you know, like, I mean, in my case, I mean, I work for an insurance broker. So we have a lot of different vendors, and we have like healthcare companies like Blue Cross Blue Shield and that, where they typically just want to give you access to, you know, this account to this account to this account, rather than, you know, let's just get a data dump of all of our accounts and access that data. Have you had any challenges either with any outside vendors where you've had that silo issue, and how did you overcome that, or what was the resolution?
Well, the question is, if you're dealing with vendors or data siloization, I'll generalize it a little bit. Clients can be included in that, but silos of data, and at being able to get to that data and ingest it where it can be utilized. Have you run into any challenges with that, and how have you addressed that? That is a meeting in all and of itself, absolutely. Data silos are something that I struggle with continually. Data silos are something that I'm trying to obliterate. I think we have some great opportunities that are sitting in front of us. Many of the vendors that you work with will communicate with you via API if you desire to communicate with them that way. Approaching them that way has pretty much opened up some of those challenges that existed before that. We also have people that just aren't going to be able to communicate with us any other way than just sending us a spreadsheet full of data. And quite frankly, we're just going to have to buckle down and ingest that and get it into our ecosystem as best we can. But yes, I spend a good amount of my time trying to break down, tear down, and limit silos, because I think that's one of the things that if we can get past that, and the more that we can get to an open data environment, the better off that we're all going to be. That answer your question, Charmaine?
Yes, that still leaves many unanswered.
Yeah, and there are many unanswered. And I will tell you that we're not alone in dealing with this. Everybody's struggling with it.
Well, and I think one thing we're doing, we are working with some vendors to help better, like with InfoJix and stuff, to better standardize process that, you know, what Mark said, we get data in many different formats. So there's a bit of trying to break down the silos, and there's also a bit of trying to work within the world that exists and be very client driven. And so if we can only get it in a spreadsheet in the format they have, we've been working to build more automated processes for that, so that at least it's less time intensive on our side, so that we can better serve that client, but also continually work to make our resources internally more efficient.
Yeah, we're pursuing the building of an AI-driven ETL engine, but I mean it's a big problem, and the solution is not simple.
I really appreciate all the questions.
All right,
so you have to go back to work?
Yes.